And then it's like, how's it going? And they're like, oh, not really noticing anything. It's like, it's your attitude. It's that attitude of gratitude where it's like, if you're actually like, oh yeah, I appreciate this. It's like when you're thirsty and you drink water and you're like, fuck, that's good. Versus like, I'm supposed to drink my 8 glasses a day and like, oh, water. 2 different attitudes to the same thing.
Totally. Well, I mean, that's just not even the filter, it's the water itself, right? It's what are you making that water via your attitude towards it? Like, how's that element acting based on your thoughts and intentions and feelings and emotions? It's like, that's the whole, like that water video that I did was, a lot of it was going into that, how we structure water ourselves and how it's in a direct relationship to the waters inside of us. And how are we making that before it enters us? It's just, yeah, too many people just don't think about what they're doing. They don't have no connection to what's around them. So
Yeah.
it's a big thing. But the same with like, well, first of all, we should introduce you. What's your name?
Hayden.
And so you've got Native Water.
Yeah, I set up Native Water about 6 years ago. Yeah, so I got myself a Kangen system about 8 years ago. And then after traveling and getting clarity on life, I was like, I'm going to start a little brand and get behind this technology with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big thing. But I mean, we were just talking before, we had a sauna and ice bath before, and we were talking about value, right? Like how people value things, and then how, you can have the best thing in the world and it doesn't matter what the monetary value is. If you don't value it, then it doesn't have value. But you could have something that's super cheap and you value it, or technically has no monetary value, but if you value it, then it gives to you a lot more, right? So it's like, we'll talk about the money side of things and the value side of things, but I'm interested too so 8 years ago, you got a Kangen system.
Yeah.
Like, what was it that led you to it, and what did you have, your journey to actually find out about it and then to take the plunge and actually you wanted to get involved?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so basically I was just, it's like a lot of things, one thing leading to another. And, I was living in Sydney. I was working in hospitality. I was managing a bar and just doing a lot of the things that a lot of people were doing back then, about 9 years ago. Some people are still doing it now. I was smoking, I was eating unconsciously, sort of consciously. I was taking, used to take supplements to like make sure I'm trying
Balance it out.
Yeah, kind of. I was drinking quite a bit, partying, I was late 20s. So I was like partying, 2, sometimes 3 nights a week. So I was really like taxing myself. And actually one day someone, a friend came into my bar in Bondi and said, he brought in this plastic bottle of water called Alkaline, I think it was. And he's like, have you heard of alkaline water? It's supposed to like prevent or cure cancer. And I'm like sitting there having a cigarette, guilty smoking like most people. And I'm like, I'm interested in that idea. I need everything I can to like balance my lifestyle at the moment. And I remember like trying some of this water and I was like, wow, that actually tastes really different. That tastes good. That's like satisfying. So then I started buying that water from the supermarket, the IGA just down the road. And I was like, I'm not going back to tap water. And I was a tap water drinker. You know what I mean? I was like, I believed that, tap water's fine. It's good for you. Fluoride's good for your teeth, all the things. I meet a lot of people who are like, I've never, ever had tap water. I think it's crazy. But I'm like, I used to be a full tap water drinker. And I spent part of my life growing up in Canberra, where I think there's like higher fluoride levels than anywhere else. So for me, it's like full journey from one end to the other, whereas I meet a lot of people, especially here in the Northern Rivers, who they've never been, drinking chemical treated water. So started drinking that. And I was like, and then after a few weeks, this is really impractical. When I do my groceries, this is the heaviest item. It takes up the most space. I got all this plastic waste in the bin. I'm like, this isn't the answer. So my headspace was in a place of like, what's the solution here? Like, how do I get good water that's potentially preventing, cancer? And back then I remember people used to say all the time, I think that, around that 2011 kind of time, there was still a lot of people, it's like kind of pre-biohacking. Biohacking was just kind of sort of getting legs in Australia, at least, where we're generally a couple of years behind, you know, the west coast of the States, for example. People just used to be like, oh, well, you know, going to get hit by a bus, you know, everyone's going to die. So, you know, might as well enjoy my vices. And I think, you know, there's a part of that attitude which I still actually kind of appreciate. Like these days, if I see someone smoking, it's like, don't smoke guiltily. Just enjoy it. Yeah, have a smoke. At least don't like, you know, don't feel guilty about it. Just either smoke and enjoy it or don't smoke. You know what I mean? So I'm thinking about solutions, and I was doing TV commercial auditions sometime like maybe within a year after that initial interaction. And a bunch of us were sitting, you know, around waiting to be called onto set. And, you know, everyone's like, oh, yeah, so what do you do? Like, you know, when you're not doing this kind of stuff. And people are going through like what they get up to. And one of the guys is like, I work with water filtration. And, you know, most of the people in the room are like, oh, yeah, that's pretty boring. And what do you do? And I'm just like, oh, cool. Well, tell me more about that. And so he starts to tell me about this Kangen technology that he's got. And I'm just like, I remember that conversation like it was yesterday. I'm like, that's crazy. No, water doesn't do that. Water's water, you know, or it's that clear liquid and you're supposed to drink this much of it. There's not like these massive variations. But then I'm like, oh, that's right though. There was that bottled alkaline water that I was drinking that was a bit different. But he was telling me that Kangen water does stuff that I'm like, that's crazy. That's like completely life-changing if that's true. And so I'm like, no, I don't believe it. And he's like, I live in Bondi. Come over to my house this week. Come and drink some and take some home. And I was like, okay, I'll take you up on that offer, you know? So I went to his place, you know, a few days later, and he's like, all right, here's the Kangen system. And he fills up a glass. And he's like, okay, scull it. And so obviously first, like I tasted it and I was like, wow, that actually tastes really good. Actually similar to that bottled stuff that I tasted, but different again. So I sculled like a pint of this, and within a couple of minutes, I was like, I can feel that in my body, like almost like I've had a coffee, but not quite, like different. And it's like I could feel it just in my brain, and then I almost could feel it in my gut. And then he's like, okay, now scull another glass. And I was literally like afraid. I'm like, I can't do that. I'll spew or like piss myself or something. I can't scull, you know, a pint and then a pint. He's like, trust me, this water, the way that it gets absorbed into the body because it's structured is it'll be fine. Try. And I was like, all right, better man up here. Scull the second one tentatively. And then I was like, wow, it's true. Like, where did that go? And that was that initial kind of revolution. And then I filled up 2 big bottles, and then I walked home. And on my way home, I stopped at the bar that I was working at the time and got a cocktail. And I was sitting there and I was like, waiting for my drink to arrive. And I was like, I feel amazing. I actually feel really like that water. I was like, I don't know what the story is. And then I used to have like I've always had chronic sinus issues. It's like, and my father does as well. It's like, you know, hereditary, whatever. So I used to always wake up with like at least one blocked left side usually. And I remember waking up the next morning and I was like, oh, I'm kind of less inflamed than usual. And then I drank a glass of this water straight out of bed, and literally like my breathing, like it opened up, and I was like, what the fuck? Like I can actually breathe. That's unheard of. This is crazy. And there was a while there where I had a dependency on nasal spray, which is like the worst now. You know, now I know that you should avoid that kind of stuff at all costs. And that's what a lot of this tied into for me. I was like taking a Panadol here and there, and I was taking nasal spray over there and different supplements. And then as soon as I realized that just drinking the right water could wean me off of all of these things that I knew weren't really good for me, I was like, all right, I should probably consider this like crazy price point if it's going to fix all of these problems for me. And so I thought about that. And then at the time I was also doing some marketing work. I was selling wine. And while in between like making calls, we had access to the internet. So I was Googling Kangen water and Kangen technology and just other competitive products for like 3 days straight before I committed to getting a, $6,000 machine. And so I'm sitting there and just researching. And after 3 days, I'm like, I am satisfied with I've seen both sides of the arguments and I've felt it in the body. I'm going to go for this. Like I'm going to commit to this. And that's it. So I got my first Kangen system and then I was just drinking it and I just had fully revolutionary experiences within the body every day. And then every week I was feeling better and better. My focus was improving. My memory was improving. I felt like I was getting more color just in my skin. My eyes were looking wider. If I went and had some drinks with friends, if I came home and had a couple glasses before bed, I'd wake up feeling way better. If I went too hard and woke up actually hungover, just having a couple liters of that water was like the best hangover cure I ever had.
So what pH were you drinking for that?
So I was following the protocol that they recommend. So because, so they recommend you start on pH 8.5, which is slightly alkaline. And then I did that for 2 weeks as advised and then started drinking 9 and then up to 9.5. So by the beginning of the second month, I was smashing heaps of 9.5. And like most people who get these systems through me, once you get to 9.5, you're like thriving on all levels. You're like, I can't get enough of this. I'm just smashing. People are drinking like 4 liters a day and just feeling amazing. So that's where I was at that point, just smashing heaps of 9.5.
So when you were experiencing these improvements though, as well as having gone onto the water, did you change anything else? Like, did you drink less, smoke less? Did you exercise more? Did you change anything in your diet?
Well, yeah, but not. I wasn't doing it simultaneously. But I found from drinking the water,
it changed your attitude. Things. Yeah. Right.
So, for example, if you had like a medium, large option to order food, I found myself rather than always ordering the large, I'd be like, oh, I actually just feel like a medium. I felt like the amount of food that I was eating was more satisfying. And also when I used to order food out and about, I'd always, like most people, order a drink with it. Because most people are chronically dehydrated, especially in our society where people are drinking alcohol and coffee all the time and in aircon and etc. So I just stopped ordering drinks as well. I was like, I'm not even thirsty. I'm like actually always hydrated. So I'm ordering food and I'm ordering a smaller portion. And then also my cravings were changing. So I wasn't craving sweet stuff anymore. I had a sweet tooth back then. So I was like, I don't need like dessert or a chocolate bar here or there, And then the same thing with exercising. I was just like getting better results. I was like, I'm building more muscle and burning fat where I've been struggling, especially around my waist, struggling to lose fat there no matter how much I was working out. And it was just disappearing. And I was like, everything I researched was true. The impact of hydrogen and good hydration affects every single part of your body because, theoretically we're like 75% water, but then there's theories that we're like 99% water because every cell is mostly water. So when you start to drink water that's structured and negatively charged and has the right mineral content, the right pH balance, etc., it just affects everything. And that's what I was experiencing in those first couple of months there.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, because that's one of the things is that some people get onto something new, but they've also done 3 or 4 other things at once. So it's hard to say it was that, but by the sounds of it, you didn't change anything else. It was actually all the benefits that you found was because of the water. But then as a result of getting healthier, you started making healthier choices as well. So
yeah, and it makes sense when it all fits in together. If you make one decision that shifts like your gut microbiome, and then it affects your appetite and your energy levels, then it's like the good results come almost haphazardly, which is one of the things I find really exciting about prioritizing water. Most people, even now in 2022, are prioritizing diet. It's like, is it paleo? Is it vegan? Is it this? Is it that? Should you do this and do that and take those supplements? And I'm like, everyone should be paying a bit more attention to water, because if you start with drinking a good amount of the right water, then that other stuff fits into that, and breathing.
Yeah. So when you're dealing with people, because you've obviously in 8 years or what have you, you're going to have dealt with a lot. Do most people have that initial hesitation where they're like, is this something I should be doing? And because I'll tell you what, I found about Kangen about, I don't know, 10 years ago. And I never thought I had a need for it because I was getting good quality water wherever I went. But I went through the same thing. I went from drinking tap water to drinking bottled water. And then same thing, like lugging big, like cartons of beer almost home all the time. And all the plastic waste and everything else. But having said that, I remember at training one time, I went to the bathroom to fill up my water bottle, and it was the only water that was there. And I was super thirsty because we were training hard, and I sculled it, and I actually regurgitated the water. It came up, and I was like, I actually can't physically stomach tap water, despite drinking it for 19 years.
Yeah.
After a little while on decent quality water, I couldn't stomach tap water anymore. So that's kind of what things were clicking in.
Yeah.
And then, so then it went from that to then collecting natural water, and then eventually, finally, living in places that had rainwater that I could, treat it as well. So just constantly, paying attention to that. I never really thought that I had the need for. I've used filters, obviously, like in different forms and that, but when I could get spring water, I never filtered it. But then even like in the last couple of years, I became more aware of Kangen, right? And I'm just going, yeah, but I think they charge too much. And I think it's too expensive. It's multi-level marketed. This is so I thought. And I'm like, I just don't like it. I don't think it's necessary. All the reasons for not actually, wanting to look at it more seriously.
Yeah.
And so then it's only been until over the last kind of couple of years where I've known you and, I keep an eye on what people do. I hear you talk about things and I'm like, yeah, well, each time I hear something, it's like, that's better than I thought it was. And then as I start looking more deeply into products, because I get asked a lot in what I do, people constantly ask me like, oh, what's a good filter? Or how do I get the best water? And I'm like, well, for what it would really take most people to do, they're not going to do it. So they're looking for something that can do it for them, which is fine. It's the same as like supplements. I don't really recommend supplements, but for most people, they're not eating like raw vegetable juices, raw meats, raw organs and that. That's like not on most people's menu. So having some kind of supplementation, even though I don't necessarily think it's the best way, I think it's a good thing for them to do. So I had to research more about filters. And each time I went into a company and like looked into it, what's the quality of it like, the components, the cost ratio, the actual quality of the water, it kept leading me back towards these Kangens. And I'm still going like, but it's like $6,000.
Yeah.
And I'm still like, even with I'm always telling people about, you can't skimp on, if you value your health, you got to value it, right? So if organic food costs more, which like we were saying it shouldn't, but it does. But it's like, well, just have less Netflix or stick less things up your butt or something. Like just stop spending money on things you don't need and spend it on things that you will actually show that you value yourself and your life. And so then eventually, I decided, well, even after I decided I was going to get one, it still took me a few months. Hey, I was like, it just still like, and then I found out you can pay it off and it's like, okay, well, there's a lot of reasons that I can finally, make that step. And since using it, I'm so happy I got it because the base quality of the water that comes out of it, but also, which we'll talk about, everything else that it does. It's like, it's got so many uses other than just drinking, which is why I wanted to chat to you because I did my video on water and spoke about the Kangen, but I only know like a tiny amount of what this thing's actually capable of providing over years of use, which then brings that cost factor. Like it's kind of like negligible when you see what you get in return.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because it's like if you're understanding how that serves you on a long-term basis and you break it down and actually crunch numbers like most of us weren't taught to do in school, it's a skill most of us have to teach ourselves. It's like, oh, that's really good value, especially in comparison to most things that I spend money on.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Well, you're right, and you're like making notes.
Yeah, I'm taking notes. You're like jogging like all these thoughts of mine.
Go ahead, just share a few things. So I got some questions, but just share anything you feel like. And
so it's interesting what you were saying there about regurgitating tap water, because I've had a similar experience as well, and I hear that experience really often too. So these days I can't touch tap water. It chemically treated typical tap water sickens me. I can drink a beer, no problem. But when it comes to tap water, it's like, no way. And one of the most, it's funny, like psychologically how we work, right? Most people in our culture, I think, value things once they're taken away, you know? It's like, or once they're limited, there's this kind of like lack, we've got this lack culture going on. And people often who get Kangen systems tell me, they're like, oh, you know, I went to Sydney last week, or I went, you know, somewhere where I didn't have access to Kangen water for a few days or longer. And they're like, I tried everything. I was like, they offered me filtered water in this cafe, and I was like, oh, it's just, they feel thirsty all the time, because once you're used to drinking properly structured, hydrogen rich, negatively charged water, where your body's like, oh, this is what I need. And then suddenly you deprive yourself of it by drinking tap or filtered or bottled, especially bottled water. People are drinking bottled water, they're just like, this is not hitting the spot. And that's really interesting, because we should be reversing that, where it's like, rather than valuing something once it's taken away, understanding where the real value is. And that's like we were saying about just shower filters. Like, this is just the company Enagic that makes Kangen systems. They do amazing shower systems as well that are like filtering, restructuring, and remineralizing the water. So you're basically showering in.
Is that Anespa thing?
Yeah, that's it there.
Yeah. So I use that at your place. So because I'm pretty sensitive to water, like I can tell, you know, I've done a lot of different stuff. Yeah, that thing. So basically, when I had that shower at your place, despite it being on town water, and I've only lived in rainwater places for the last 6-7 years.
Yeah.
So I'm like, if I go and shower, like we had that shower out there after the sauna ice bath, and I'm like, that's shit. I can just feel it straight away. I can smell it, can feel it on my skin. And when I had used that Anespa at your place, despite it being on town water already, I was like, that feels amazing.
Yeah.
Like, that's a really good feeling. Like what do you call them? Waterfall.
Yeah, that's it. And that's their concept. It's like, if you hook up an Anespa in your shower, you're supposed to feel like you've just showered in like a waterfall, like a crystal clear water. And that's it. It's like, again, those Anespa systems are pretty expensive. And most people are like, there's no way I'm going to spend that much for my shower water. But again, if you think about it, if you're having 1 or 2 showers a day and you step out of your shower and you feel $1 million, you're like, man, I feel so good. I feel revitalized after that shower, even more so than even just using a basic filter. It's like, what's that really worth over time, especially, you know what I mean?
What's an E8PA member price?
They just have like, it's some kind of like, I haven't actually ever really gone into it, but there's like a membership that you can like subscribe to where you get like discounts or something as well. Yeah.
Do I get that price because I have one of these? Or do I
think so.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Eventually I want to get one.
Because you've got a Kangen system.
Yeah.
If you get another, like if you get an Anespa, you get your commission paid back to you for like your, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, if someone were to buy one straight up in Australia, it'd be $3,300.
Mm-hmm.
But then if they get it with their commission. But yeah, we should look into that more in terms of what that actual membership entitles people to and what you need to do to be part of it.
Yeah, because it's a lot less.
In terms of the way that the business structure works, I've just always simplified it. I'm like, I don't know, just once you get a Kangen system, that's step 1. And then if you want to get an Anespa afterwards,
we'll talk about that, because the business structure is one of those things that put me off initially. But again, it's one of those things that I made so many judgments about it without really knowing the full story. So
even me, going back 8 years, when I first got my Kangen system, the guy who I got it from was telling me about the business structure. And I was like, sounds like, you know, potentially powerful, but not my cup of tea. I'm like, I'm not a salesperson, first of all. Even though I was kind of selling wine, I wasn't like, I'm not out there like, you know, pitching stuff to people that, you know, and I'm not a water salesman. But then over time, as I was drinking it more, and I was like, this is fucking amazing. And then I'm sharing with my friend. I'm literally filling up bottles and giving them to my friends. I'm taking big bottles to work, and I'm like, guys, get onto this water. It's like, and people are like, this is amazing. And then eventually, as I said, I went traveling and had a bit of a spiritual journey. And on the journey, I was like, I think I should get behind that, because this is needed. people don't even know about this. And here we are like 6 years later, and I'm still like meeting people and I'm like, where are you at with water? And they're like, oh, just it's way more people. I've watched the journey over the last few years. Way more people are drinking filtered water now and moving away from bottled water. But still people don't understand that the vast majority of people don't understand what I think should be basic knowledge for everyone in terms of the impact of drinking structured water, etc. Yeah. But even as I was about to say before, just using a basic shower filter like that, like these ones are just American basics, cheap ones, but they take your chlorine and a few other chemicals out of your water. That alone has a massive impact. Like I used just one of those when I first got set up, it was like this and this. And then eventually I got my Anespa. And then the difference between that and an Anespa is really noticeable, as you noticed. But just removing the chlorine out of your water, life changing for most people. People don't realize chlorine is a poison. It is in the water to poison things for the reason of protecting you, right, from bad bugs. But it also affects your good bacteria. It devastates your gut flora. So every single time that you're drinking chlorinated water or showering in it, and when you shower in it, the chlorine is converted to chloramines in steam, right? So it's like chloroform.
It's even worse.
You're inhaling it, so it's going into your bloodstream via your lungs. You absorb up to a liter, they say, on average when you shower anyway, in warm water especially, or if you're soaking in it, even worse, if you're having a bath. So you're just bombarding yourself inside and out every shower you have without a filter. And it's funny because a lot of people now are starting to clue on to filtering their drinking water. But the concept of a shower filter is like, oh, that's like extravagant. It's like, it's not. It's about as extravagant as, servicing your vehicle. You know what I mean? It's pretty valuable. It's pretty good idea to do. But even, just using a basic filter like that, I still hook up a lot of those for people because I'm like, even just get one of these and then at least you're getting free of that, that chlorine at least.
Well, okay, let's just go back a step. So what is Kangen water for people that don't know? Like you've mentioned it, ionizing, structuring, filtering, like what does it actually do? What's the point?
So coming back to my notes here, the story of Kangen is really interesting and it's short basically, right? So just over 50 years ago, some Japanese scientists were researching things like, quantum healing and miracle healing and stuff. And they looked at a couple of places in the world where people were pilgrimaging to for water, like Lourdes in France, for example. And they were studying blue zones like the Hunza Valley up where Pakistan meets Nepal, I think is where it is, and other areas. And they were realizing that in little pockets where people are like going to drink the miracle water and having miracle healing results, and in little areas where people are living longer and more healthy, people living into their hundreds comfortably, they found that those waters were hydrogen rich. And then hydrogen rich just goes hand in hand with alkaline and mineral rich, etc. And so they were like, all right, well, theoretically, this kind of hydrogen rich water is amazing for longevity and healing. So how can we create this within so that can be available within a home or a hospital? And initially, so then they realized electrolysis does that, yeah. So positive, negative, you split your water in two, which is what these systems do. I don't know if that can be seen on camera, but this is the main hose here where alkaline water comes out of, and that little exhaust hose on the side is where the acidic water comes from. So out of the main hose, it's negatively charged, alkaline, mineral rich, did I say negatively charged? Mm-hmm. Water, and then hydrogen rich is what I forgot to say. And out of the exhaust is the opposite. It's positively charged, acidic, oxygen rich water, which is good for your skin, ironically, which we can get to. Because in case I forget, basically we're like plants. We're like walking around swimming pools. We are bodies of water, There's a theory even that basically like humans is like water is consciousness that is like created, life, and then eventually like humans, and we're just water walking around in like, little suits, right? And so if you break down like how the human body just functions on a basic pH level, we're basically like plants, right? So imagine like your hair is like your leaves, and then you're like root chakra is like your roots, right? So if you're, for most plants at least, you want to be watering the soil with mineral rich water, because the plants need the minerals. That's why you put fertilizer and stuff, right? It's like, so you water the soil with mineral rich alkaline water. The plants love it, but they love to be rained on, right? So that's acidic water. Like typical rain is around about pH 5, slightly acidic, very few minerals. So typically, rain falls and then it gets remineralized in the soil. But if you're using a pot plant as a perfect example, it doesn't have that regeneration because it's disconnected. And so you've got to add the minerals. So basically, if you've got a pot plant and you water the roots with mineral-rich water and then you spray it, you mist it with beauty water or pH 5 water, which these systems create, that's a super happy plant. And so we do that with our bodies. We drink the mineral-rich alkaline water, but then we shower in the acidic water, which is mineral depleted. And that's what our skin loves, because the top few layers of our skin are all acidic. That's its natural pH balance. And so in terms of uses of the water, as you were saying before, there's 7 different types of water, and you can use them for topical application as well as drinking. But coming back to the roots and the form and the basis of the company, when they came up with electrolysis as the method to replicate this natural healing water that can be found in pockets around the world, electrolysis was the key. So splitting it into 2. And so then they realized the Kangen that's the way to do it. So you split it and you've got your, so it's negatively charged. From my perspective, that's arguably the most important element of the Kangen water, negatively charged. It's hydrogen rich. Hydrogen is the most powerful antioxidant on the planet. It's like, forget all of the other antioxidants, all the things they say is antioxidant. It's like hydrogen, number 1. It's free radical scavenging. When you drink it, it's out seeking toxins and free radicals in the body. It's neutralizing them and it's expelling them. It's also energizing. It's amazing. It heals the whole digestive system from the mouth all the way to the colon. Then it's mineral rich, and obviously minerals is what we need. We are generally eating a mineral depleted diet these days, especially in Australia, where the soils have been devastated here for the last few hundred years, theoretically. So to make sure we're getting the right levels of magnesium and manganese and potassium is essential for general basic bodily function, right? And then it's alkaline. The alkaline it has been a big conversation, right? It's like one of the least important factors theoretically, but that does come down to pH balance. If certain organs in your body are out of whack, out of balance, they're becoming more acidic than they should be. If you're drinking alkaline water, unless it's in a bottle, that can help your overall body to balance the pH. That's the key that people need to understand there. And then people say, well, doesn't that interfere with digestion? And it's like, it can if you drink that while you're eating. You're not supposed to drink water while you eat. Again, by the way, Kangen translates in Japanese to return to origins, which is basically like, remember your ancient roots, And if we took wisdom from our ancestors, they'd be saying, yeah, of course, you don't drink water while you go and you drink your water when you're thirsty, and then you eat when you're hungry. Yeah. If you drink water while you eat, you bloat and you don't absorb your nutrients properly. And most people are disconnected from their true selves.
I think it's also the way it does it, because there are alkaline waters that I've met so many people that they're like, I'm drinking pH 9 water, and they're like, I feel shit. I feel like my stomach's like, I'm getting all these fucking, I don't know. And I'm just like, well, because you're not really supposed to. But the way that this does it, it's different. Like, this water absorbs a lot quicker into the system as well. So it's like that typical rationale of not drinking highly alkaline water is just different with the technology that this thing
that's right
has.
And it's a big conversation, and it's a very valid one too. We should not be drinking alkaline bottled water. That's not natural. Most bottled alkaline waters, and I found out in that one that I was originally trying, that's not actually natural, even though they say it's bottled at the source and it's alkaline. It's like, basically they need to add bicarbonate soda. Pretty much all alkaline bottled waters is like bicarb to bring the pH up, and then it just sits there. That's not natural. That's not what we need. It's the wrong kind of alkaline. Mm-hmm. And you notice it. Like when you drink it, it's like, yeah, that's actually, it tastes and feels better than tap water. Or, by the way, most bottled waters are acidic. Like, I don't know, I shouldn't be mentioning brands, but basically if you look at the label on your bottles, and if you just go and get some basic pH drops from like a an aquarium, pet shop, or swimming pool shop, whatever. Get some pH drops, test water. It's like it's all highly acidic. So if you're drinking that all the time, you're shifting your body more into like oxidative stress. So if you're drinking coffee every day and you're having, 3 serves of meat, I know like, have a different perspective on meat, but I think that lots of meat without balancing with other
if it's
stuff.
all cooked and it's poor quality, you're going to get very acidic.
Yeah, and that basically people are overdoing the acidic stuff, right? Like coffee plus alcohol plus acidic bottled water. It's like you're basically prematurely aging yourself rapidly, and you're putting stress on all your organs. And then I've been saying this since I found this stuff out like 8 years ago. I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. No wonder like everyone's getting sick and everyone's like, yep, cancer's inevitable. And the stats are like now 1 in 2 males in Australia will get cancer at some point in their life. It's inevitable. I'm like, yeah, because everyone's doing the wrong thing because we've been disconnected from our roots and from the natural way of living. And so as soon as you bring it back to like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. It's so simple. All right, cool. So I'll just balance what I'm putting into my body so that I'm not overloading with acidity and toxins.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm drinking a good volume of good water, then my body can regulate and expel toxins. It's so simple.
If we just talk about pH for a minute, because like you said, this splits it. You got the alkaline out the top, acid out the bottom. So you can split this from 2.5 and 11.5 right down to an even split of 7 each side. So can we just go through the acids, which is starting at 2.5, going up towards 7? What would you use these acids for? Because one of the things that I wanted to chat to you about is the multitude of uses, which can replace things like beauty products, cleaning products, oral products, whatever. So starting at the acid end, what would you use 2.5 for?
So 2.5 is very acidic. It's similar to stomach acid, yeah? So the reason our stomach acid is so acidic is to kill parasites, bugs, pathogens, etc. So 2.5, for example, I put it in a spray bottle and I use it in the bathroom and the kitchen and out and about. So that's a natural hand sanitizer. So it's more effective at killing harmful bugs, etc., than alcohol or chemicals or anything else. It's literally there are surgeons now, like revolutionary surgeons, who are using it in their vet clinics and their surgeries where they're in places where they're actually, able to get away with it. It's more effective. So, if you get a cut and you put Dettol on it, the Dettol sterilizes it, but it does cellular damage. So that's why you bleed more when you use things like Dettol, and it slows down the healing process while sterilizing it. Whereas if you use pH 2.5 water, it actually increases the healing process like colloidal silver because it's doing selective oxidized sterilization.
And no chemicals, so you don't get any residue and toxicity in the body. So
exactly. So you can use it directly on the body. You can treat heaps of conditions like eczema, similar skin issues. You can just use 2.5 plus 11.5, then pH 6 afterwards to kill and pull and then balance. But you can also use it on surfaces, right? It's like chopping boards, bathrooms, toilets, floors, like you name it, anything. You can just spray it all down. This is what should be used in hospitals, in hospitality, in restaurants.
I thought this was used in hospitals. Isn't that why it was developed?
In Japan, that's right. That's the story that I was saying about 50 years ago when they realized, okay, with electrolysis, we're creating the ideal drinking water. But wow, also we're creating this sterilizing. The strong acidic water is very powerful too. And then there are actually hospitals here in Australia that are using it now. I heard a couple of years ago that a couple of hospitals in Sydney were starting to mass produce strong acidic water to use to they can basically just spray down like a whole hallway in an operating theatre, and they're saving a ton of money because they're not using chemicals, and it's more effective and it's easier. Like they just need to spray it and then they just mop it up rather than going through a whole process. But initially in Japan, not these systems, but the initial Enagic, Kangen systems, they were using them in hospitals. And I think they pretty much installed them, from what I understand, across Japan in most hospitals. And people were drinking the water pre-surgery and then post-surgery for more rapid recovery, because Japan is it's more of a preventative culture. And they also really, in Japanese culture, they've got a real value on water itself. You know, that's why Japan comes out with some of the world's best whiskeys, because the whiskey quality is all about the water source. And yeah, they're really tuned in to valuing water there and people healing effectively. And that's why they've got a couple of the world's most amazing blue zones, and why generally the lifespan in Japan is longer. They've got better longevity than us.
And so then what's the next one up from 2.5?
So yeah, so from 2.5, which is sterilization, then you go up to the beauty water, which is slightly acidic. So pH 6. So if 7 is neutral, that's slightly acidic. And that's generally just used for like skin application. So it's like if you take a little jug of that into the shower. So if you're on town water, you're on alkaline water. And that's really good to rinse the hair and the skin with at the end of the shower for just nice pH balance. But as I was saying before, if you have any like weird things happening on the skin, that is something that if you apply that consistently, that can balance skin issues out as well. But also plants love that water, as I was saying before. If you're spraying your plants, they really, especially like outside, like if you give it to your plants that actually, that you're giving fertilizer to, they really thrive. There's a cafe here in Byron Bay called Fell's Kitchen, and they've got a Kangen system. And if you go there, they've got these ferns hanging outside. And if you speak to Clay, one of the owners, Clay and Fell are husband and wife. Clay's like, people are like, oh, what's up with this Kangen water? And he's like, look at those ferns. He's like, I give those ferns. He's like, when I bought them, they were like, they won't last you 3 months. He's like, it's been 2 years. Look at them. They're just the happiest plants ever. And it's like, yeah, that's Kangen. It's just chemical-free, pH-balanced water. And again, we're basically walking around plants.
And you take that out of the bottom chute, right? If you're going to use the beauty water?
No, if you make beauty water, it comes out of the main hose.
Right.
Yeah. So, and then that's also a natural backflush. So we're supposed to run the beauty water every day for 10 seconds, which does a natural backflush. Yeah. That's the only time you're collecting acidic water out of the main hose.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to clarify that for people. So, all right, cool. So then from 6, you go to what, 7 or what?
Yeah. So 7 is just neutral. It's just basically just filtered water. And that has 3 main purposes. First of all, basically kids under the age of 4 don't really need like to be drinking, alkaline water, because they're already quite alkaline. So you can give like, babies and toddlers just neutral water if you want. Again, it depends on the other things that they've got going on in their body and their environment, right? But also if you're taking medication, if anyone who is, a lot of this stuff with this technology is really taking into account people with cancer, diabetes, etc., because this is super powerful in terms of bringing people back to balance, to homeostasis. So 7 is there. It's recommended. So if you are taking pills, drink a glass of 7 with that, because as soon as you add hydrogen to the mix, because hydrogen permeates the cells so effectively, it can amplify the impact of pharmaceuticals. So it's good to drink 7 with pharmaceuticals. And also the other factor, and this is what I forgot to say before. So, like when you were saying people drinking pH 9 and they're like, I feel like shit, that's Herxheimer's effect, right? And this is what I learned early on. I actually had a period where I was actually overdoing it in part of that process of adapting to the pH. And I know what it feels like to have Herxheimer's effect. It's like you can get lethargy, you can get nausea, you can definitely get diarrhea, and you can get headaches and skin breakouts. So some people, when they first start drinking Kangen, some people go hard. They go, I'm doing the 9.5. I don't care. I'm going straight for the 9.5. And then they're like, I feel kind of crappy. And it's like, yeah, because that hydrogen is stirring up toxins, but then there's not enough of it to then expel them. So you're stirring them up and they're floating around in the body. That's the point where if you just go back to 7, you can just smash 7 until it's flushed all of those stirred up toxins out of the body. And then you start feeling, you're like, oh, I actually feel better than I've felt in years right now. So that's the third use of the 7. If you get to the point where you're like, I'm over detoxing, it's like bring it back down.
Mm-hmm. And then you go to 8, or is it 8.5?
So 8.5 is like the entry level. It's like the rookie Kangen. So that's slightly acidic.
But everything
alkaline.
From 7 to 9.5 is just for drinking. You don't really have other uses for it. Like you're varying levels of how much hydrogen you're getting into your body.
That's it. Yeah, between 8.5, 9, and 9.5.
Yeah,
it's just a bit more hydrogen, a bit more powerful.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
So
you work
even
your way
like
up.
these days, I drink a lot of 8.5. I find it's like, I fill this bottle with 8.5, for example. That's like, it's easy sipping water. It's not like stirring anything up. But 9.5 is like, if you drink that, it's more energizing and it's more detoxifying. So that's the cool thing about these systems. You don't just start at 8.5 and then just drink 9.5 for the rest of your life. Once you start to tune in with your body and feel which water's having which impact, you can, most people eventually bounce between 9.5 and 8.5, depending on how they're feeling and what they feel like they need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. That's one of the things, like I say, it's just there's so many ways that you can use this as a machine. So then if that's mainly for your drinking and for your hydrogen-rich nature of the water, you can go all the way up to 11.5,
Yeah.
which is obviously, if you go to the 2.5, you're getting that out of the bottom. So then this is giving you 11.5, right?
That's right.
So then is that the one that's for heavy-duty cleaning? What's the...
Yeah. So the 11.5, it's funny, you know, even when we talk about Kangen systems, people are like, oh, why would I pay that much for drinking water? It's like, if you just break down the pH 2.5 water by itself, it's like, it's an amazingly useful water. Like even just that alone is like, you know, an incredible thing to have in the house. And then you add the 11.5 to that repertoire. And also on my website, there's a link which is like the various uses of the various waters. It's the most comprehensive breakdown online that I've ever found. I've taken information from all sources and put it together really concisely, where it really breaks down each of these pH levels really
What's the
effectively.
website again? Because we'll put it in the link, but just while we're on the call, what's the...
nativewatermovement.com.
Cool.
Yeah. And so the 11.5 is amazing. So for example, if you're buying produce that potentially has any chemical residue on it, if you soak that produce for 5 to 20 minutes in 11.5, that water pulls and breaks down, because most pesticides, herbicides are oil-based, so that when people spray their crops, they don't wash off in the rain. So pH 11.5 actually emulsifies oil. You can Google, or you can, you know, see tests where if you take 11.5 in one glass and then just like regular water in another, and then you put some drops of oil in it and then stir them around, the 11.5 fully breaks down the oil, which is like unheard of. So imagine applying that to, you know, pulling chemicals off your food. That's one use. It also does that within and on the body. So you can do a foot bath. It sounds like, again, like trivial, but if you do a 20-minute foot bath where you just put your feet in 11.5, it's pulling toxins, because your largest pores of your body are under the soles of your feet, and it pulls toxins from within the body. It's like doing like a dialysis, you know, program. You can do that like every few days, or especially if you're having some real health issues. It's crazy powerful. I know people who have done that and they're like, the water went milky colored after I did that. It's like, yeah, you must have had to shift some stuff out of your body.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep. Or they were lactating out of their feet somehow.
And then the other thing, so 11.5, it's like produce, it's detoxing. And it's like, if you get food poisoning, there's a protocol where if you drink like a glass of 11.5, that can neutralize anything that's creating harm within the gut. They also say that it's like a good hangover cure. I feel like when people drink, I used to drink wine. I pretty much don't drink wine anymore, because even these days, if I just have a glass of natural wine, with this even sulfite-free wine, there's something about the process of wine making, the fermentation, where if I have a glass of it, I wake up in the morning and it feels like there's something hanging around in my gut. So if I drink a glass of 11.5, you can feel it. It's like it goes straight to the gut, straight to the bottom of the gut. And it's like neutralizing and collecting things off of the gut lining. And then you chase that with some pH 9.5 or 8.5, and then it flushes it out. And then it's like, oh, whatever that was hanging around is shifted. And there's a whole other bunch of uses along those lines. Like it's supposed to prevent rust on metal, and you can also remove rust from metal as well. Similar concept of it, just like it breaks stuff down.
Cool. Yeah. I want to get into the money side of it and also the business side, but before we do that, because I think we'll just finish with that. There's a lot of people make water filters, right? And this is a topic that I did bring up in the water video that I did. And there's quite a few, I don't know. I mean, everyone, you could just call them all competitors, whatever. But there's a lot of people that make filters. And in my research, as I was looking around at what everybody does, everybody makes claims. But the thing is, it's an unregulated industry, right? Like there's no overarching, like water expert body that's regulating the industry. It's like a lot in the health industry, especially in the alternative health. It's an unregulated space. So a lot of people can make claims and not really have to back them up. And that's what I was seeing a lot in the different brands that are out there. But there are a few people, and I noticed this in general, where I've noticed this whole time you've been talking, you haven't necessarily named brands of bottled water. You haven't named other water filter companies. And what I get from that is you're just excited about this. It's like what I tell people in the just the local space. They're always worried about what Bill Gates is doing and some cracker over in where I'm like, who fucking cares? It's like, focus on what we're doing. If we're creating something good, you don't need to worry about that. And I noticed that when people don't just go trying to bring something else down to make themselves look good, it's kind of like that's saying a lot as well. So I'm not asking you to name stuff, but I have had similar experiences around here, just keeping an ear to the ground. And there are people that I think when somebody's doing something that appears to be harmful, I think in a way that's not necessarily just outing them or tearing them down, I think it's important for people to know what's really going on because, as I said, most of these industries aren't regulated. So people can make claims left, right, and center. And I don't think it's very fair. I actually never heard anything bad about Kangen, except that people say it's overpriced for what it is. That's the main criticism. And also that, it's just like not necessarily any better than other water filters. But I never heard anyone say it was bad. I never heard anyone say it's toxic or it's unhealthy or anything like that. It was all just around value versus whatever, right?
Yeah.
Or efficacy. But I did mention in my water video that there's a local brand that potentially is making filters that are not so good for you. Not only that, but they will actively go and try to say something bad about competition, such as, a Kangen, for example. So I just think it's important that we at least bring this up as a topic because I don't like holding things back when there could be harm being caused to people that are trying to do the right thing for their health.
Yeah.
So now I'll just say as well that I don't have firsthand knowledge. I've just heard from a couple of people and you've given me a similar story, which is why I just wanted to bring it up. So all we're going to do is talk about our experience. We're not necessarily making claims about brands or what they do and don't do, but we're just going to talk about our experience so that people can then, I guess, ask better questions for themselves and do their own research into it. But there is a company around here called Alkaline. And when I did my interview with Wayne Slack from Groundwater, which I also recommend, it's my favorite thing to do is to use Kangen on the rainwater that I've got, and then I put a Grounder rod in there, and it just makes it like magic. It's unbelievable. He said he was talking bad about Kangen because he goes, "Oh, is that Byron Bay company?" And I'm like, "Nah, that's not what Kangen's been around for over 50 years." He was referring to this company as well. So it's like I've heard the same thing from multiple people. So that's why I wanted to bring it up. Again, I don't have first-hand knowledge of what goes on. However, what I've heard is that there's aluminium used in some of the parts. Whereas in Kangen, for example, you use platinum? There's like platinum plates and that in them.
Yeah.
It's like high grade stuff.
Yeah.
And I've also heard there's questions around the prevalence of lead in some of these systems and that it actually got found out, but they didn't tell their customer base. They should have done a recall and didn't do it. So I don't have first-hand knowledge of that, but I think it's worth bringing this up in a way that if those guys are not doing this, of course, I'm happy for them to sit here as well and talk about their story. But just from a personal point of view, you used to do like water information and testing locally, right? And you had a bit of a bad experience with those guys. Do you want to just share some of that?
Sure. Well, one of the other criticisms that has fallen on Kangen systems. So yeah, some people say, it's like crazy expensive, multi-level marketing undermines its, true value. But one of the other criticisms that's come up that it's unfortunate because people say it, but then they often don't say it to your face, but then they, do these sort of Chinese whispers, talking around about this being the case and therefore Kangen water is not good for you. But it's like, if you, this is like everything else. It's like, if you're genuinely concerned about something, confront it. Yeah. Stop like whispering and beating around the bush. It's like, ask the question or go do the research. It's one of the things I realized on this journey of Kangen. And by the way, the brain, 80% water. And when you're drinking water that is effectively detoxifying you and you're living in a toxic environment, we live in a toxic environment, mostly, especially if you're in the city. The more you drink that, the more good water you drink, the more your brain is being detoxified, the clearer you get. I'm like, if you like interviewed someone who knew me, 10 plus years ago, I used to like vague out all the time. I was like, I wasn't anywhere near as, I feel like these days I'm quite a bit sharper. I feel like I've got good focus. I surprised myself on this journey because I was like, man, this water, I actually listen better and I have better vocab recall, and I just feel like my brain just generally works better. And I wish that more people could have this experience, because the clearer you get, the more you see how much around is like really foggy. You can see a lot of people are like, I'm not really sure. Like, I'm kind of lost with a lot of things. And if more people had more clarity, it would be better for the collective in general. So, but coming back to that, one of those criticisms is that ionizers, like systems that use electrolysis, can leach heavy metals into your water. And so you're drinking this Kangen water, but it's actually, you're getting like heavy metals. And people are like, oh man, that's crazy. Like there's a whole conspiracy here. They're trying to sell these expensive units and they're actually like doing you harm. And it's like, if that's what you think, then test it. Like, go and put that to the test. Do some research and you'll find out. And most people don't do research. Well, most people just want to, like, they hear something and they go, oh, okay, that's that. It's like, do some research.
That's the thing that, again, about, you just hear so much stuff, right? But the thing I appreciate the most about you is you're just like a no bullshit guy. Like, even me talking about Grander recently, you're like, well, if that's the case, I want to find out about it. You're not like, you don't just have Kangen blinkers on where you're like, that's the best and only thing, nothing can beat it. You're like, well, I want to, and you're going, let's test it. Like, you've been saying to me, let's go get water samples. Let's go can we do that microscopy to look at the structure? Like, you're that kind of guy. And that's what puts me off a lot about anyone that gets fixated on a product or a supplement, whatever it is. Is because they don't have a knowledge of health or nutrition or water or how it all combines. They've got a simplistic attitude where they're like, no, this is just the answer to everything. Whereas you're like, no, let's test it. If you think it leaches heavy metals, you're not like straight away, no, it doesn't. You're like, well, test it. And you'll see, like, you've got that attitude, which is really refreshing. But anyway, continue.
Well, that's where it comes down to like life philosophy. From my perspective, that's where it came from. I'm like, all right, so it's expensive, but it's the best. And again, it started to shift my perspective. So simultaneously, with more clarity in the brain, I started analyzing life differently. Like, wow, so why would I smoke then? I feel like for every glass of this I'm putting in, it's like every glass is like, this feels good. Oh, I'm helping myself. I'm promoting health. And then every cigarette, it's like, this is the opposite to that. And then you start to shift away from all the things that are harming you, or not all of them, but like, many more of them for most people. So my philosophy is basically simple. It's like, I'd rather just have the best available. I want to eat organic food. I want to drink the best water. If I find out about something that's supposed to be better, then I test it. And if it is, then I can incorporate that. So over the years, native water, as I said before, it started just Kangen is the main focus. But then it's like, but also these other technology filters, because they're also really useful. And then eventually whole house filtration. So if people want to get their whole house filtered, also we do that from a different brand again. And then it's like, okay, if Grander wands and Grander systems are, and I've also been using Theon restructuring devices as well, doing whole house restructuring. So it's not just about Kangen. Exactly. It's like, this
maybe just make that distinction, because native water movement is not a Kangen, like you do distribute Kangen, but it's not a Kangen site. It's actually more than that, right? It's like it
focuses on Kangen. Kangen still, from my perspective, is like, it's the magic. It's the most powerful tool for people around the world to be able to really boost their health. But then for other things to complement that, it's like whole house restructuring and filtration systems can complement it. And then potentially Grander could take it to another level again in terms of, the structuring. It could do that again. But coming back to the original point, which is when people are like, oh, Kangen systems, heavy metal poisoning. It's like, no, that's one of the reasons why they're actually quite expensive, because the plates that they use to do electrolysis, they are titanium coated in platinum. So it's like it's like having a Rolex watch inside the system because it doesn't break down. It never breaks down. These systems they've got like one of the original systems they've got in the factory in Japan. There's only one factory makes these systems. It's in Japan. They have a model that's like nearly 30 years old right now. They constantly do tests and constantly show the world. They're like, look, the system's still performing as good as new. There's no metal leaching. However, there are competitive brands out there which use lower quality metals that do break down into the waters. And that company that you mentioned before, I heard had a competitive ionizer on the market, and it had lead as one of the parts of the metals, and people were experiencing lead leaching into the water. And we know what happened, in the Roman Empire. Lead poisoning can lead to like insanity, etc. It's like, it's not good to have lead in the system. So that was one. Yeah, someone told me, I know a few people who had those systems. And then there's all these other companies now. People are like, oh, but what about this one? It's only like, it's much less money, but it looks cooler and it has this function and it makes all these things and you don't have to clean it. I'm like, that's terrible. Imagine someone told you, here's a car that you never have to service. It's like, oh, that actually sounds really cool.
Yeah,
but
that sounds good.
But it's like, when you like clean your system once a month, for literally it takes 4 minutes to do it. It's like brushing your teeth. Imagine if someone told you just need to brush your teeth once a month, and if you do that, you're going to have real healthy teeth for the rest of your life. Sweet, amazing. When people are like, you don't have to clean it, it's like, that sounds bad. Like that's not going to last you 30 years, yeah? Because coming back to gratitude and value, when you if you look at like your Kangen system, like it's like one of your babies, it's like a baby. If you look after it, if you actually nurture it, it's going to grow up and look after. No, that's not the right perspective. It's like, it's going to grow up healthy and you're going to be able to have a good dynamic. It's like, give it love.
Well, this is the thing, is that ideally when we're talking about health, if we're investing in ourselves, we want to be taking a long-term approach, right? Like I use the expression when I'm talking to people about like detox and cleansing and that in the body. They're like, oh, well, I'll just do this cleanse. It's just like a week. And I'm like, man, if you spent 30 years shoveling shit into a cow shed, you're not getting that out in a week. It's going to take you the same amount of time pretty much to unshovel that stuff out. Like, you can't get it out in a week.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about, if somebody's even interested in something like a water filter, my opinion is that they've got to take a long-term approach to that. It's not something that you just fix in the short term. So knowing that this, yes, it's the most expensive one that I found, which is like I mentioned in my water video, but it's going to last. Like the cost breakdown over the long term, which you helped me realize, is actually significantly less. Like even just replacing the filters is less than a lot of the competition.
Yeah.
Everything about it over the long run ends up costing less. And I think you did a breakdown of how many years or something it takes for it to like cost way less than a $300 filter or something.
Yeah, well, that's the irony. You can be getting like $200-$300 filters or $800 filters, but over 20 years, they're more expensive than a Kangen system. With a Kangen system, it's just the initial investment in the device, but then to replace the filters is actually cheaper. It's such an ethical company, again, based in Japan. They've got one Australian office. If you want to service your machine every couple of years, for example, they only charge you $40 to service the machine. It's crazy cheap. The filters go on sale twice a year where they do a $30 discount. So if you just get on an annual cycle, you only need to replace them every 12 months. If you do an annual cycle, by the way, that depends on the source. If your water source is not really good, it could be more often than that. Yeah. But then that's when you want to start putting in like pre-filters. And that's one thing that we should touch on briefly too, which is your water source, if you've got rainwater or town water or spring water or whatever, or bore water, that's another thing. Most people can't differentiate between bores and springs. They're two different things, But Kangen systems can cater to all different sources of water, all different pH inlets. You can set them up to, and that's because the internal filter doesn't filter out fluoride per se. And people are like, that's not cool, man. Kangen systems, they don't filter out fluoride. That's not, it's like, why should they need to? Like here in Byron Bay, we don't have fluoride in the water, so we don't need it. If you're on rainwater, you don't need it. But if you think that there could be, then just get a little pre-filter that focuses on fluoride. Simple. Yeah. And that comes back to what you were saying about aluminium. There are a lot of water filters out there that use aluminium oxide as their fluoride removal media. I've spoken to so many water experts over the years, and you could just literally like Google water filter companies and call them and ask them what they think about aluminium as a method of removing fluoride, and almost all of them say avoid that at all costs. And if you have a system that has it inside of it, then use another level of filtration to then remove it if you can.
Yep.
And those systems that you were talking about before, which are crazy popular, and part of the reason that they are popular is because of aggressive marketing. And again, tapping into this lack culture where it's like, don't get the best for yourself, get something that's a lot cheaper, save a bunch of money, and they're also better. And then people go, that sounds good to me. I'm saving myself a lot of money and they're better as far as this person. It's like, why would you believe that? Based on what? You know what I mean? On their aggressive, dishonest marketing. So then they get these systems and then they start having memory issues and fogginess. And it's like, yeah, that system has aluminium in it. You're trading one neurotoxic metal, for another, chemical for a neurotoxic metal, Where's the logic in that? And again, if you don't even have fluoride in your water, why would you be using aluminium? You don't need it anyway in the first place. So first of all, there needs to be truth and clarity around that. And I always tell people, go and ask them to their face. Just go there and say, is it true that that's a thing? And furthermore, like you were saying before, yeah, like for so many years, I just ignored that, I didn't want to be talking natively about competitive products because I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in focusing on what's effective and positive. But then when that local based company was like taking photos of my Kangen station, where I literally would say every Saturday, come here, talk about the water, taste it, feel it, fill up bottles, take it home. People were coming and having like amazing health changes. There was a woman who used to come down regularly and she's like, my urination is come back to normal. Thank you so much just for letting me come and fill up for free. And then people actually coming down and actually learning about it. I thought it was, and we were doing that every single week until lockdowns. And that felt good. It feels good to be open and honest about it. But then that company came and took a photo and then posted it on local community groups saying, beware of this technology. It's not good. And our technology is cheaper and better. And then again, I just jumped on and commented like, you want to come down and chat to my face? Come and say it to my face and have a chat in person.
But you don't like come and say it to my face, motherfucker. You don't like that.
No, it's like come and be honest, be upfront. And then they deleted the post. It's like that's dishonest. It's not upfront. And water is about truth and transparency. And that's I embrace.
Well, this is the thing that I think a lot of people aren't even aware of is that water, it's a sacred element. It carries memory. Like it carries the intention and the energetics. It's structured by us. Like I really think like this thing's great, but there's nothing that is made by man that's not already inside of us. Like it all is a representation of that, right? But so the thing is if you've got a company making things that lies to people, and again, we're not necessarily accusing them of doing that. It appears that this is the case. And if they so wish, they're more than welcome to come and sit here and talk about what they do. But it's just that when it does appear that there is foul play, I think it's a duty to actually just bring it up so that people can consider it and that people should ask their own questions and do their own research. Like you said, go down and talk to them and what have you. But for me, it's like, if the company is doing that, well, then what's happening as a result energetically? Like, how is that coming into the memory of what comes from the machine, for example? How is that affecting the body? I should actually bring up as well, because our mate, well, I don't care about naming people because he's a good mate, but Dave reps the Alkaways, and he says that he's getting great. He says he feels great off it. And what I see this a lot where people but they bounce around a lot of things and they're like, oh, I just took mushrooms. It's great. As mushrooms is in like reishi or whatever. And then, I'm doing like this water, I feel amazing. And then I'm doing like this new diet, I feel amazing. It's like, yeah, you're doing like short-term stints on things. And what people don't realize is that if you do get exposed to toxicity, you can actually feel really good for a while. Some people can feel real sick straight away. But if you get an influx of something that's not good for the body, what the body has to do to compensate is it'll overproduce certain hormones because it's its way to deal with things. And you can feel energetic. So when people just starve themselves on certain very highly depleted diets, they can feel great for a month. But long term, they're going to do themselves real damage.
Yeah.
A, because of what's in that stuff, but B, because they're getting an inflammatory, adrenaline-rich response to that. So then they're overproducing those hormones, and over time, what that's going to do is lead to hardened glands and organs. It's going to produce too much insulin. They're going to have other problems as a result.
Fatigue.
Yeah, fatigue will come later, and they don't realize that initial, and some of it's just a placebo effect where they're like, I just got myself a new thing, and they just, it could be anything. It could do nothing, but they're like, culture, I feel great,
right? We have a disposable culture, and people are constantly looking for the next fix, and that is what we're constantly marketed to from left, right, and center. And so we live in a diet culture as well, right? Everyone's like, yeah, I'm dieting this week, I'm not having that this week. Whereas if you just bring it back to
balance.
Yeah, balance. Like, why do it for a week? Why don't you do it every single day? Why don't you drink amazing water every single day for the rest of your life? You don't need to you can still do like juice fasts. I think that fasting is amazing, dry fasting and, water fasting, so powerful. I realized, even if you just take one day a week, you don't have to do it every week, but if you set an intention, say for example, every Saturday, I'm just going to skip brekkie and lunch, and I'll just have dinner, an early dinner.
Just do intermittent fasting, yeah.
Literally, and then make an intention to drink a large volume of water. By like lunchtime, it's like, I feel so amazing. I don't know why I don't do this, more often. It's that simple. You don't need to do these extravagant and expensive diets and fasting things when you're just bringing it back to basics, especially around water.
Yeah.
I wanted to say, coming back to what you were saying about like vibration and intention, it's really important. And for some people, that stuff's still, woo-woo. But a lot of people, especially in this region, are like tuned in to, spirituality and connection to land and water. And the vibration and the intention and the fact that water does have memory. If you go and study the work of Victor Schauberger, Gerald Pollack, especially Masaru Emoto, these guys, these are the pioneers. These are the guys who delved so deeply into water. And then also you can go another layer deeper. Deuterium depleted water is starting to study water on an atomic level. That's super interesting as well. We're talking about hydrogen and we're talking molecular. We can go another level deeper if we want. And that's a really fascinating concept to me too, which I want to explore more in the future as well.
Well, I want to have more kind of regular chats with you. So we'll definitely get you back on to talk about other stuff. But
maybe once we get some deuterium, info, that'd be cool to like go a little, we could call it like a layer deeper, but basically on a simple level, and I was taught this a few years ago, because for me, when I first got my Kangen system, as I said before, it changed. I was like, wow, this is so powerful. But then I realized over time, we have that power ourselves, but only if we tune into it. If you're doing all the right things, you can restructure your water with your own personal vibration. And I was taught a few years ago, the best way to get the most out of your water and food is to take a moment and literally just take a moment and think, I'm really grateful that this water is so good for me and serving me. And I love this water, because the highest vibration is love plus gratitude. So I appreciate this water. I love it. I'm grateful for it. And I'm also grateful for just being me. I'm just grateful for me and what I'm doing. And then when you drink your water or eat your food with that self-appreciation and appreciation, very few people do that, but that's theoretically the highest. And that shape, you're actually having an imprint, a vibrational imprint on your water. So theoretically, it doesn't matter the source if you're doing that, but most people aren't doing that or ready to do that at the moment, which is why, again, where this kind of technology, which is restructuring your water to a high vibration, this is a very powerful stepping stone tool. And again, long-term goals for the native water movement are to be working with original custodians, not only in Australia, but internationally, aiming to connect with some native people in Bali soon as well, to extend that goal, is to restore all of the waterways here to their original natural flow and to stop using chemicals in all of the water and using restructuring quantum devices so that we don't need chemicals and all the water's flowing naturally and it's got minimal pathogens. Because at the moment, for example, they're using large volumes of chlorine up here. There's like a lot of fluoride in the city. There's no fluoride here theoretically, but there's a lot of chlorine. People come here from the city and they're like, fuck, there's a lot of chlorine in the water here. Hey, it kind of smells like a swimming pool. And it's like, yeah. And they don't even have a specific science about it. They call it flocculating. They go to the water stations along, first they got the dam, then it comes to a treatment station, and then they flocculate volumes of chlorine. They don't know. They never know for sure like how much actual chlorine is in the water at the end when it comes out of your tap. That's a non-specific science. That's like witch doctory. That's like weird,
All modern science is like that.
And it's the same with fluoride. When they're like, fluoride's good for your teeth, you should drink this. But it's like, but for what? For like a kid versus someone who weighs 100 kilograms, how much fluoride are they supposed to be having? And if it's good for your teeth, why should you be swallowing that? No, fluoride is a neurotoxin. It disconnects you from your natural flow. It's that simple. And you can feel it. Once you remove it from your system, you know that it's serving you to have a clear mind without that. And then if you go and drink, as we said, you drink some tap water, especially in a city, it's like your body's like, whoa, how was I drinking that all the time? So just capping on that concept, bringing things back to that natural state is so important, I think, to not only be embracing effective technologies, but to be tuning in with your natural imprint on your own water. But again, even though they're throwing all this chlorine in the water here, we have blasto, which is a parasite in the water here in the northern rivers. And people think it's just in tank water because initially it was traced to like bat poo in tank water. So it's really important for people with rainwater to actually filter it first of all. But then it's in the town water here because there's so much pipe breakages. Byron's renowned for its potholes and its erosion, and there's cross-contamination here of sewage. I met a guy the other day who works on clearing pipes, especially since the floods. And he's like, mate, if you saw what I saw, you wouldn't be touching tap water, maybe even with a filter, because it's so hectic what's happening in our pipes. But we take it for granted. We like, the government must be doing the right thing. And of course they're looking after everything. And I pay my taxes and my taxes pay for that kind of thing. But it's like the reality, unfortunately, is that it's a mess out there. And we need to take our own health into our own hands. And effective filtration and then restructuring is the most powerful way to do that. And Blasto, it's crazy. It's crazy. You can have a family of 5 all drinking the same water, and then they test everyone and everyone's got Blasto, but only 2 of them have got like chronic fatigue, and then the other 3 are okay because it affects everyone differently. But Blasto in the water has the potential to destroy your energy levels, your gut microbiome, leaky gut, etc. So again, using effective filtration to make sure you're not ingesting Blasto with every glass of water you're drinking, that's super important as well until we can clean up this.
Well, you know what it is? It's not actually the whole bat thing. That's like saying COVID came from bats. It's it's not a real thing. Like I literally, I wouldn't do it voluntarily, but if I had, I'd eat bat shit, no problem. But so if an animal shits, it's generally, unless the animal itself has been exposed to a lot of neurotoxins, I'd eat its crap because it's actually good for the body. But what it is, the reason that water can become full of anything, parasites, bacteria, whatever. By the way, there's a term called pleomorphism, which is where microbiota can morph between, like a fungus can turn into a bacteria, can turn into a parasite and all that sort of stuff. So what it is, it's actually lack of oxygen. So it's when you get too low in oxygen, like you've been talking about, you'll get too acidic. And when that happens to the water, because the water is essentially dead, it's non-living. It has a huge amount of, they've found a lot of bacteria in clouds. So how do you get bacteria in clouds? It's only there if it's eating something. What's it eating? Well, it's eating a lot of the chemtrails and whatever. And the way, the water tanks we have here, you've been up there, it's how many 25,000 fucking aerials on there. It's it's so depleted from life force and energy. Bearing in mind it's a living thing. If something can carry memory, it's technically in some ways living. You're nuking it with all of that, all of the 4G, 5G, 3G
frequencies,
RF antennas and all that on the town water supply. Then it's going through the dingiest of pipes that have been there for who knows how long with fuck knows what's down there.
Minimal maintenance.
Minimal
You
maintenance.
speak to the companies that maintain them and they're like,
and it's tepid.
not
It's
on
been
top of this.
still for a long time. Like everything about that water carries a memory that I would not want to have in my head or my body or anything.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't. I wouldn't want that. If that's a
basically
memory,
like a traumatized
exactly.
kid rocking up on your door, and it's like you essentially need to like embrace that child and like, you know, show him some love so that he's like, oh my god, okay, I'm okay. And then it's, you know, when your water arrives on your doorstep from that system, it's arriving traumatized.
It's traumatized,
and it can transport that trauma
100%
into you.
100% it does. So this is the thing. It's not that anyone's shitting in the water. Like there was that theory about COVID came from snakes fucking pissing in water. I was like, that's so gay. But it's what it is the water is so depleted that is nature's way to try to balance something out.
It's imbalance.
That's why you have things like blastome, whatever.
Well, according to local naturopaths here, and I've spoken to 3 of them who see heaps of people, they say people come back from, you know, Bali where it's like you can't drink the water. You you brush your teeth with the tap water and you're like your gut's like really out. They come back and they're actually okay. Like they recover pretty quickly. But it's actually worse here in the Northern Rivers for parasites, yeah? And I think probably that just comes down to that imbalance in the water, the over-chemicalization, the mistreatment of the water in general. So again, it just comes back to like...
Well, that's also the reason that people respond differently, because blasto by itself is technically not necessarily harmful. Yeah. It's what environment is it going into? Is that environment depleted? Well, then it's gonna be eating a lot of shit. So then that's why people can feel bad. But yeah, but this is why, again, like I'm not trying to like make this a sales thing for you. It's just kind of like, and I said it in my video before I even knew that I'm actually hearing some stuff from you I've never heard before, right? And I said in my video, if somebody cannot tell me that we can do everything that this grander anything, that we can do that ourselves. If somebody doesn't know that, they don't know water. So I'm actually quite pleasantly surprised that you're telling me this sort of stuff.
This is what people say to me sometimes. They're like, why don't you ever talk about this or talk about that? And I'm like, because I've been speaking about it for 6 years. And the first couple of years when you're like really getting behind it and then it's kind of falling on deaf ears, you get like fatigued by it. You're like, I'm kind of over talking about it. But then that's why I like doing podcasts, for example, because when I'm actually in an opportunity where we can actually really break it down in one conversation, it's like I go back to all of that knowledge that I've like acquired over the years where it's like, yeah, man, isn't this like, this is interesting, that's interesting. But in terms of like constantly talking, it gets old. And because people have a lot of resistance to this stuff, I think that again, there's quite a lot of programming where people self-sabotage quite a lot in our culture. I think that that's been imprinted on people. When you talk about this kind of stuff, you're like, do you realize that this could like sort a lot of your problems out and it could really empower you? And if your brain's operating at its full potential, you could achieve all your dreams. People aren't like, really? That's amazing. Let's do that. They're like, oh yeah, I don't believe ya. Anyway, I'm out of here. Yeah. You know, that's really like the more common reaction of people being like, I don't really. And Australian culture, interestingly, is quite resistant. Hugely they say that apparently a lot of American, companies test their marketing on the market here. And if it gets through, then they're like, all right, this is going to kill back in the States, because Aussies, for whatever reason, are quite like untrusting. And so whatever works here theoretically works more effectively elsewhere. Yep. So this is one of the hardest places to actually, share wisdom with people, because most of the time they're like, who are you? And then that's questions I get over the years. It's like, are you a naturopath? Are you a
what's
doctor? What's your qualification? It's like, I'll tell you what my qualification is. 8 years of like diving deep into this with a really positive, open-minded perspective and using myself as a guinea pig. I don't recommend anything to people that I don't use. That's what like pretty much what I do. Besides water, if I'm recommending like medicinal mushrooms or CBD oil or any of these kinds of products like EMF protection equipment, I'm like, I test everything, I use it. I never recommend anything to anyone that I'm like, this is the best version that I've found. And that's what I said to you before. Like, when you talk about something that could be better or add value, I'm like, oh, I'm interested in that. You're interested, I want the best for myself, and I don't share with anyone else unless it's...
Well, this is the thing. It's like I don't meet many people, and I've been in the health industry for about 20 years. I don't meet many people who have this kind of attitude about stuff, where it appears to me that your main aim, intention, reason for doing what you're doing is for everyone to reach a higher potential. It's not, you're not hiding behind money or a brand or like we're not going to run out of time today. We won't talk about the money and the business side. We'll do another session. We'll talk more about that. But that's kind of like almost part of why I've enjoyed this chat. We haven't even really spoken about that. It's been more about water and why, all that. And I just don't meet many people that see, if I know that if I had someone else here, even somebody who's a Kangen distributor, it'd be more about like the buying a Kangen as opposed to like how we relate to water and why. Because even having the mindset of wanting to invest in something like this, you're automatically better connected to your water because you're actually intentionally wanting to improve your life and the quality of the water. So that goes into the water itself. That alone can improve society, right?
It's like we were saying at the beginning of the conversation. Some people, when they get their Kangen system, they like fully embrace it. They want to try everything. They're using it for all the things. And typically those are the people who are like, I'm loving this. I'm loving this water. It feels amazing. I'm loving the machine. Whereas other people can kind of get them reluctantly. And then they're like, yeah, I don't know if I'm really noticing anything. And it's like your attitude towards it can completely shift your experience with it. And you just reminded me that have you heard of the word ikigai?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a Japanese word that means like the reason for life. Like it's like why you get out of bed in the morning, And again, in blue zones, they found like one of the things that keep people living longer and happier is if they've actually got a reason to get out of bed, a reason to live, And for me, I appreciate being able to like put a roof over my head, earning commission from Kangen systems, and just selling other filters that work that actually. But for me, that's why I got into it. I was like, what can I do that's actually going to potentially earn me a decent income that can survive, like a financial crisis and be used internationally? Like, what's something I can do where I could be anywhere and use it, but that actually feels good and that is actually serving people? I was like, because I was, as I said before, selling wine and bartending, hospitality and whatnot. And it's like, this isn't fulfilling. I'm not doing something that's having a positive impact on our reality. Whereas this technology and the business structure, it has the potential to revolutionize the world in really positive ways when embraced with the right attitude, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that's my ikigai. When I hear the stories of people when they're like telling me about their amazing experiences drinking Kangen and what the shifts in their body, and when I see more color in someone's skin and more whiteness in their eyes, which is really common after someone's been drinking Kangen for like 2 weeks, I'm like, that's it. That's why I do this. I love the fulfillment and the satisfaction of seeing people being healthier and happier and clearer.
Yep. I'm just looking up ikigai because it actually I think it means more than what you said. It's like this it's not just your reason for being. It's something that something like it's here we go. Yeah, what the world needs. It's what you love, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, what the world needs. But there's this overlapping of those various elements, which
I've seen that diagram.
Yeah. It's
like
why I love
circles.
Japanese culture, because they can have one word that, like in English, our language is so it's not good. Whereas ikigai means so many different things, and it's this whole marriage of so many parts to life that I think. Anyway, if people haven't heard of ikigai, just look it up yourself, because there's a lot more to go into with just that word than just your just a purpose. It's a marriage of a lot of things that can make for a very happy life.
Exactly.
And I love the concept.
Yeah, and just the other thing I wanted to mention that's related to that before you run out of time is it's like glass. Yeah, drink your water from glass. Don't drink it from metal. Don't drink it from plastic. It's actually okay to drink from metal if it's only in there for like a short term. But if people are filling up, especially with Kangen specifically, because it's hydrogen rich, hydrogen interacts just like it's actively scavenging things in our body. It does the same with materials. So if you leave your Kangen water in a metal bottle for like 2 days and then you drink it, it's like it actually it can taste metallic.
Yeah.
And the same with plastic. And we all know like microplastics are hectic, but still most people are drinking. So every time I see people drinking from like a plastic, a reused plastic bottle, I'm like, get onto the glass. And then most people are like, yeah, but glass breaks. And I'm like, get a little case, get like a little one of those wetsuit cases. I usually have one. I don't have it on right now. Or just something to protect the glass. And that is, again, the impact on the water is going to make a huge difference. And then you can also get into different shades of glass, right?
Yeah,
Mirren versus amber versus green versus clear. I think the clear is the best because you can, that's another thing maybe we can get into next time. Like your water absorbs frequencies from the sun. Yeah. So you can actually program you can fill up your water in the morning, sit there absorbing that UV red light spectrum. And then as you drink your water, you're actually drinking light, right? And that's one of the modalities that's now being used. People are healing different cancers with probes with UV lights inside the body. It's this, again, it's like the same thing, just back to ancient ways.
Yeah.
Which is what the word Kangen means.
Yeah, I love it. All right, that's a great place to wrap it, man. It was a good chat. You want to add anything else?
Last thing on that note, sorry. So that's the other thing. So a lot of people that we speak to are like, why would I get one of these when I'm using one of those, systems that are cheaper, or I can just get a basic filter, or I get spring water? It's like, first of all, spring water for me is a huge issue that not many people are really exploring. First of all, is it actually spring water or is that bore water? Two different things, yeah? Either way, have you got it tested? Do you know what the mineral content is? Do you know if there are any chemicals in it? Is there any glyphosate in it? Is there parasites in it? Then, are you letting it just sit in plastic? I don't care if it's BPA free. BPA free is better than non-BPA free, but then it has other things. Anyway, how long is your water sitting there? And furthermore, when we're talking about structure, most people still don't understand that when water sits stagnant for periods of time, it loses its life force. It loses its charge. It no longer serves you. You're then just drinking a dead liquid that is better than, drinking some other things, but it's not like full impact having the best effect on your body. So most people out there who are like, I just get spring water. It's like, first of all, is it spring? Secondly, test it. Thirdly, don't let it sit in plastic. And fourthly, don't let it sit stagnant for days. So at the end of the day, again, the Kangen technology solves a lot of those issues because it's like, that's basically having a high quality spring that has all of the elements that you need, but in your home. That's when you get a Kangen system, you're putting like a sacred spring in your home. People need to know that.
Well said. This is what I wanted to do is, to do this with you is to just explore a lot of things. Cause I know you're a guy who's not just going to dig your heels in about a previous belief. Like you're always willing to expand your knowledge for the betterment of, you've got a pretty clear dedication to water, which I think is very refreshing, which is kind of a pun, but yeah, I just like it. I think it's good. So we'll do quite a few chats, I think, over time and explore a lot of these things because like I say as well, if you're going to collect natural water sources, spring water is probably the best. But again, it does depend on that source. And not a lot of people, they're too willing to just take the advice of even us. Like no one should believe everything we're saying, for example. You got to look into it yourself because yes, spring water can be the best natural water source, but where is that spring? Like you just said, and people don't want to know because they're like, no. I just want to know spring water is the best. And then I don't have to think about anything. If I get spring water, I don't have to research water anymore. I can just watch the TV again and go back onto Instagram.
So-and-so said it's the best. I don't want to question
that's
that.
It.
That works for
Some
me.
Some influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers told me that this is the best product or this is the best water. So that's all la 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 la.
And also,
don't want to hear
like
anything
we were
else.
saying before, you and I both were on that journey where we were buying, we were carting around water. And it's like, who wants to cart around water? You want to go and pick up spring and carry it. It's like...
Oh, I quite like that because I actually enjoy the process of going and collecting.
But if you go to a spring though, that's kind of special. But if you go like to the markets and fill up a bottle and you carry it around to the markets and it's coming out of a plastic tank on the back of a truck, which is getting bumped around and the structure of the water is getting messed with between the spring and the market. It's like, you don't understand...
Yeah, exactly. But just to
water
with keeping it in like an urn at home, that's what the grander rod's for. Yeah. Because if it does sit stagnant, that grander is actually continually structuring that. So it's a good thing. But this is stuff we'll talk about as we do a few chats. Obviously, there's a lot to unpack. Water's not as simple a topic as a lot of people think it is. So I'd love to just continue chatting, talk more about the Kangen. We will get more into the value side, the cost side, and also the business because it's not actually multi-level marketed like I originally thought. I had this huge block to Kangen because I'm like, I can't stand multi-level marketing.
Even me, like I said, when I first got my system and it's like, you can get commission from this. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. And then I naturally was like sharing it with people. And then eventually it was like, actually, if you analyze the business structure, first of all, it's not a pyramid scheme. Secondly, it's not really a multi-level marketing traditionally like doTERRA, completely different structures. It's actually a patented, unique structure I describe it as more of a spiral, which makes it more ethical. People who are promoting Kangen technology are incentivized to continue to help people and to continue to sell them themselves because that's what that makes sense. If you really like sit down and break it down, it's like, yeah, of course that's the best way to get this technology out to the world. If people weren't doing what I'm doing, this kind of knowledge wouldn't be getting out to more people because there wouldn't be, it needs to be owned. People need to take it on and really like get into it and then live it. It needs to be lived and experienced for it to actually work as a business structure, as a technology. Otherwise, it's basically like selling X-ray machines. Imagine if you said you need an X-ray machine in your home. People would be like, I don't get it. Why? This company is saying that? Nah. You need people to be like, I'm living it. I'm a living example of that. And that's why they set that structure up. And also the way it works financially, it makes sense. It's like really healthy commission.
It does. We'll talk about that next time because when I sat down for a good chat with you about it, because I said that to you, I'm like, dude, I don't gel with multi-level marketing. I don't want to be spruiking.
Most people don't.
Taking advantage of water, but it's just not. So anyway, that's just foreshadowing what we'll speak about because it's a lot more. It feels good actually, the business structure, and I'm not really doing this to promote it really. I mean, yes, it's there, but it's not the prime purpose of it.
Awareness raising is what's needed around this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Because people are waking up more and more to what's really what's worth prioritizing.
Oh, dude, the way the world is going, if people don't have filters over the next few years, it's kind of like, I don't know what they're going to be doing.
Our environment is getting increasingly toxic.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Yeah. And we need to clean it up. We need to get to the root of the problems. But in the meantime, we need tools that help us to be able to thrive, not just survive.
Exactly. And then as you get healthier from the help of things like this, people can come more into themselves and activate themselves, which is, I'm glad you said it too, because this is one of the things that I try to impart the most is that I think that we are the ultimate purification vessel.
Yeah.
Like we're the most powerful creative force here. And
it's like that saying, it's like get a filter or be the filter.
Yeah.
As well. So you can purify stuff, but like, can you? How are you?
Are you activated yet? So getting chemicals out of your body, getting better stuff in, like that's where this stuff has its main place, I think anyway. But as I said, we'll talk more about that as we go. So thanks for joining us. Hayden, what's your site again? nativewatermovement.com?
Yeah.
.com.
That's it, yeah. And thanks for having me.
Sweet.
It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Thanks, bro.
I like talking about water.
Yeah, I know you do.
It's nicer to talk about it in a within an hour than all the time. It's refreshing.
Another pun. Thanks, bro.
No pun intended.